And ladies and gentlemen, it's now time for your main event. In this corner, from parts unknown, coming in at a combined weight of 532 pounds, the J. Bone Express. And in this corner, utilizing the Freebird rules, your tag team champions of the world, at a combined weight of 832 pounds, the Brothers in Kayfabe.
All right, well, here we are, the Brothers in Kayfabe podcast. This week is a little different. We're just going to cut right to the chase. Unforeseeable attempts on my life. And by my life, I mean the life of my Macintosh ProBook computer has occurred. I have been a loyal supporter of Apple products, mainly just for their music support. It has proven very well up until I accidentally upgraded to Catalina. So if you are a Mac user, whatever you do, do not update your operating system to Catalina if you want to literally do anything other than surf the internet, because you will be punished for trying to do anything. Apple, if you are listening to this as it's being cleared to be uploaded to Apple Podcasts, I apologize. I take it back. And hopefully I'll be meeting with some tech wizards to remedy this situation. But anyway, just like the mailman from WCW, Carl Malone, whether it's raining, sleeting, snowing, or the sun's beating down on your neck, the Brothers in Kayfabe podcast will go on. If you are just tuning in, you are listening to the voice of one of the three brothers in Kayfabe, Landon Bumgarner. Jimmy and Jake are at their remote locations. They will not be on this week's episode. Today's going to be way, way different, but it's going to be way cool. At the core, the heart of this podcast is we want it to be a podcast where we don't analyze wrestling, we don't review, we don't do any Meltzer reviews. We just hang out and talk about why we like wrestling. And so we're going to do a little interview ski today. And so I'm going to introduce my guest with an S at the end, because we got two guests this week here in just a second. So without further ado, I want to bring on two of my best friends, one of them being my roommate, the other one being an illegitimate roommate, much like Hornswoggle to Vince McMahon's lineage. But that's okay. I've got with me today in Studio LB, David McCright. David?
Hello, ladies and gentle giants.
And his brother, Alex McCright.
Would it be? That was lame.
Oh, well, we're live, pal. Which turns out after all these years, JR, if you watch it, JR doesn't say we're live, pal. He says it's live, pal. But we're live, pal. Just sounds way better. So, in the world of kayfabe, we're keeping live,
keeping it 100.
We keeping it 100 with Conan. Speaking of Conan, we never let the truth get in the way of a good story. That's the most brothered out wrestling thing I've ever heard. Well, let's just jump right into it, boys. Let's talk about wrestling. So, David and I, we met, just for some background context, David and I met in second grade through Boy Scouts. Shout out to, was it Mike Jackson or Mike Johnson?
Mike Johnson.
Mike Johnson's oldest scoutmaster in the West. I would later go on to see Mike years and years later, and he was still alive somehow. Showed up at his first night back at Scouts in middle school. He was still kicking it, and it was his birthday, and I signed his birthday card and said, it'd be like Mike, or something like that, mainly just to pop myself.
Bad A old man.
But anyway, David and I, we met in second grade, and then due to some external reasons, I left the Scouts, tried to make it on my own in Japan, and Mexico and Puerto Rico and all those other places.
Now
And
you're
anyway,
jobbing out in Oklahoma.
jobbing out in Oklahoma. Anyway,
Take wrestling serious here.
hey, we do. Shout out to the Junkyard Dog and Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Mark out, Matthew, if you're listening. Anyway, David and I, we later reconnected in 6th grade. So for some reason in the Oklahoma public school system, you couldn't call drama in 6th grade. You had to call it communications. Although we didn't learn anything about communications. We just learned the basics of drama.
I think the template said that it was for like learning how to do public speaking and how to present things and whatever. But it was just drama for 6th graders.
Well, in their defense, we did do one presentation, and that's how we really became friends. Was we had to do like a poster board of whatever our presentation was over, and I decided to talk about how I liked wrestling. And so I put a poster board with a picture of Shawn Michaels and of Kane and John Cena and maybe Hulk Hogan or someone like that, and gave my speech. And as I was up there, I gave some kind of cheesy little intro of like, whether it's being slammed through a table, choke slammed to the mat, jumped on off of a ladder, or many other things, pro wrestling offers enjoyment to everybody. And David said, "Woo, Kane!" From his desk. And I thought, hey, he knows the name of a wrestler. He might like wrestling. And so shortly after the presentation, I went and sat down by him, and we just started talking about wrestling. And, well, the rest is history. Now we live together, and we've been marking out. Maybe we'll talk about e-fetting later.
Oh, yeah.
So you guys have heard my earliest memory of wrestling. You guys have heard Jake's, you've heard Jimmy's. And so, David, I want to know, what is your earliest memory of professional wrestling?
Well, my first and earliest memory of professional wrestling is maybe my first memory in general that I can really remember off the top of my head. And that is an interview that Stone Cold did with JR in a hotel room where he's got like a bowl of fruit behind him. And I remember him being like kind of a jerk to JR. And this was in the old duplex that we used to live in Yukon before my brother Alex here was even born. So, and I think it was from like late 1997. So when I think about like, when I try to put a date on the earliest things I can remember, I didn't realize it was that long ago, but when you showed me the date, I was very surprised. But yeah, I just remember him being kind of a jerk to JR, and my dad saying something like, "I don't understand why he's being so mean to JR. That's his friend."
Yeah, it is his friend.
Yeah, that's something that just stuck out to me to this day. And I told you about it, and we rewatched it recently, and it is truly a gem. And I really feel fortunate to have grown up getting to watch Stone Cold in his peak during his run at the top, which was the most successful run in WWE/WWF history.
Easily. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring you and Alex on, because you, Jake, Jimmy, and myself, we all got into wrestling late. To whereas I feel like with pro wrestling, you have to be grandfathered in by another fan. And for us, we met those fans later on in life. But for you and Alex, you had your dad who grew up, as we alluded to earlier, with Mid-South and things like that. Late WWF and WCW, getting to be a fan of that. So I love hearing your perspective, because you got to grow up in absolutely the most popular, most successful time in professional wrestling history, without a doubt. Is Hulk Hogan the most well-known name? Absolutely. Is Stone Cold the biggest draw of all time? 100%. There's no denying that. The evidence is out there. So I want to ask Alex the same question. Alex, what's your earliest memory of professional wrestling that you can think of?
Gosh, of my first memory that I can tell you that I remember watching and that is ingrained in my brain is probably Kane setting JR on fire in '03, right after he got unmasked. And, I was maybe 5 then. That's not really something a 5-year-old should be watching, but one a 5-year-old could be watching. And I'm the man I am today because I watched that and watched him be under house arrest and throw Shane McMahon to a burning dumpster and all that other great stuff he did there when he got unmasked.
All right, this is the Brothers in Kayfabe podcast, but let's shoot a little bit. Was there a legitimate time where you were actually scared of Kane?
Well, I met him in maybe '04 or '05. I don't remember the exact year. And it was very hard for me to get within 10 feet of him, let alone to take a picture with him. And he couldn't have been nicer. It was just me from what I saw on TV, from all that stuff that actually did legitimately scare me. And it took until I got older and they kind of devalued him a little bit and me getting more used to that stuff that he didn't quite have the same scare effect, but he definitely did at that time for me.
Now, David, what about you? I know I have it on good authority that you would sometimes have dreams and nightmares of looking outside the window at school and even at your house. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Oh yeah. I was super scared of Kane. When I was really little, he was terrifying to me, and I think that's part of why I was drawn to him. Like, cause he
It was larger than life.
oh yeah, and he had that feud with Stone Cold, and Stone Cold was my favorite. And he came in, and he was the first guy to win the belt off of him. He had the drop the blood on him really stood out to me, and that was terrifying. But then like Alex was alluding to, when he got unmasked, it's almost like that fear level came back just stronger than ever, because he was doing crazy things like setting JR on fire, electrocuting Shane McMahon in his nether regions. And I used to have these like daydreams where I would be like sitting in class in second grade right after this happened. I would envision Kane with his red gasoline can like he had when he set JR on fire, and I would just be like scared and looking around like that he was going to be there and he was going to set the school on fire or the teacher on fire, or worst of all, if he set me on fire. That the whole thought of that terrified me. He was a scary dude, and I thought he was kind of, even though the burns weren't kept up the same as they were like week 1 when he got unmasked, like they didn't keep the makeup going, like I kind of wish that they did. They did a little bit, and the way the presentation was with the bald head and everything, it was scary. He looked like he had been burned, in my opinion, as a little kid, but he was terrifying to me, and that definitely shaped my image of scary people. And I have always had a fascination with people getting unmasked, so that played right into that.
What's funny for me, I got into wrestling a lot later. I think my earliest memory of Kane was seeing, I think is it Bad Blood 2004, whenever he puts the chair around Shawn Michaels' neck and stomps on it. I can't remember.
I believe that was on Raw.
I think it was on Raw,
Yeah,
and maybe they
in
had
04.
maybe they had like the match at 04 or at Bad Blood coming back.
Yeah, I think it was either Bad Blood or SummerSlam.
I
know it was a summertime pay-per-view.
Yeah, it was one of the two to where he came back, but I remember seeing the clips of Shawn Michaels in the ring. Kane is beating him up, puts the chair around his neck, climbs to the top rope, and then jumps and stomps on it. Shawn Michaels starts coughing up blood, and I was like, whoa, that guy's scary. Fast forward a couple of years later to when I was watching wrestling full time, because I'd seen that one on whatever pay-per-view it was. where they had the blow off match. Friends of this podcast and best friends of mine, at their house, they would buy some of the DVDs of the pay per views. And so I watched it on there on kind of like the build up video for the match. It was like, whoa, that's just terrifying. This bald guy in black tights with red barbed wires just crushing his throat. But fast forward to 2006 when I was watching regularly, and the May you know what angle started. Rip Rob Conway. May's family never forget what he accomplished up until that point. And for me, seeing for some reason this certain date just made Kane snap, and he would just obliterate people on TV, and then he starts alluding to that it's whenever his step family was killed in a fire, and it was absolutely, like, as a fifth grader watching it, just blew my mind. It was terrifying. And then a couple of weeks later, his tag team partner at the time, Big Show, starts talking about it and gets on to him. It was like, what's the big deal with May? You know what? And Kane keeps telling him not to say it, and he keeps saying it, and Kane starts beating him up, and then uses his fingers and starts like gouging Big Show's eye out, and Kane pulls away, and Big Show's laying down backstage screaming, and you just see all this blood coming out of his eye socket. And brother, it terrified me. There's a reason I and you and Alex, we just don't say that date anymore. If you want to see why, check me out on Instagram at Landon Bumgarner, and you will find video evidence of why we don't say that thing. So David said his absolute favorite wrestler of all time was Stone Cold, with Kane as a pretty strong second. Alex, who's your favorite wrestler of all time?
Well, when I was younger, and truth be told, probably the game WrestleMania 18, my favorite was Scotty 2 Hotty. But then when I got older and he kind of was jobbed out of the company, as I got older, I kind of went towards Undertaker and Shawn Michaels, because Undertaker carried that presence throughout really his whole career that Kane had at times, and when he started out and when he got unmasked. But he had that the whole time, and then I don't think there's a better in-ring performer than Shawn Michaels. I'll take those two guys over anyone.
All right, if you're playing WWF Attitude, who's your favorite?
Oof. I might go with Stone Cold.
That's not the answer I wanted, but I'll take it. All right.
I think he's reaching for a certain guy that might be in.
Who's your favorite competitor at WrestleMania 12, the backlot brawl match, other than Roddy Piper?
Well, let me think. Was Mae Young in that match? No, Goldust. Yeah, I do love Goldust. He was another guy that they kind of devalued him as he went along, but he was such a great character, and Dustin Rhodes did such a great job selling that character and bringing so much to it.
And what I love, and for David, he's excused with his answer of Stone Cold, because that's like asking a kid in the 80s who their favorite was, and they say Hogan. That's who else would it be? But I love people who grew up outside of those peak eras in wrestling, and getting to hear them say a nonchalant. Like, I love the fact that you led with Scotty 2 Hotty because of a game. It's just, I love that idea, and that's the core belief of this podcast, is finding out what individuals like about wrestling versus what the masses like, per se, because there's different people that like different things. Jake has talked about his dad has never watched wrestling a day in his life, but his favorite wrestler is Haystacks Calhoun, and I think that's both the funniest thing and the coolest thing at the same time, or the fact that both of your you share the same father, and that his favorites are like Junkyard Dog and Hacksaw Jim Duggan.
Ric Flair's is number one.
And Ric Flair, like, what cool answers to have.
Anyone managed by Bobby the Brain, that's another pick for him.
That's true. And what a lost art, just how cool managers used to be and what an important role it is. I'm gonna put you both kind of on the spot with this. We've talked about your earliest moments. What do you think is one of the most impactful moments in wrestling you witnessed? Maybe it's not your favorite, but it's one that hit you differently than anyone before, or uh, maybe it's not only did it just hit you differently, but maybe it was a more emotional moment or something like that, if that makes sense.
Well, I have quite a few emotional kind of moments. If I were to think of like the top things that made me emotional, there was like Kane unmasking was huge. Uh, um, Stone Cold losing to The Rock at WrestleMania 19. I don't know why, but that just crushed me. I cried about that like a little baby. I can't believe that affected me so badly. But my dad was like, "Oh, he hit him with 3 rock bottoms and beat him." I was just shaken up by that. And then when I heard my dad told me after WrestleMania 20 that Brock Lesnar, Goldberg, Stone Cold, and The Rock had all left the company, I was crushed. I was like, okay, wrestling's dead forever. I don't know how I'm ever going to bounce back from that. Go ahead, Alex.
Alex, what about you? Do you have a moment that, whether it was just extremely emotional or just impactful?
Well, I can think of 2 of them off the top of my head here. There's the WrestleMania match between Shawn Michaels and Ric Flair. Gets you in the feels every time you watch it. And then another one would be the WrestleMania 28 end of an era match. And just, I mean, they kind of lied to us, but we thought that was the last we'd see Shawn Michaels, of Triple H, at least in the ring, and of The Undertaker. And I thought, what a way to go out for all these men. And I didn't think wrestling would be the same after that. And in many ways, it hasn't been, but great match, great ending, iconic moment.
Nothing's ever finite in wrestling, is what I've come to understand as a fan.
Hey, Goldberg's debut's up there too in WWE. Now that I think about it, because I was huge on him in WCW. And
the
comes
infamous Sup Rock.
Yeah.
There's there's certain moments in wrestling history that David and I will quote to ours. It's guaranteed if you're around the two of us for more than 10 minutes, you're going to hear an infamous wrestling line quoted to each other. And a lot of the times, unknown or not as well known wrestling lines, just for the sake of popping each other. Okay, let's take that just a little bit further, as because with a lot of wrestling and just as fans in general, there's those that are obsessive that there's nothing in their life outside of wrestling, and then there's people that get into wrestling and they love it, but everyone to some degree has a stage of where they step away for a while. Or I think during the Attitude Era, people that were like in middle school and high school at the time that got really into it, and then as it kind of died down, you have the people who quit liking it or quit being public about liking it because of the lack of popularity of it. But what I want to get at is, what's a moment to where maybe you weren't quite as much of a fan, but you happened to see something that pulled you back in and gave you that moment of, oh, like, well, now I want to watch next week when I haven't wanted to watch in quite a while, if that makes sense.
Well, that's actually a really good question. That's pretty cool. Because I have a moment like that. Like I said, I kind of had lost some steam in WWE after WrestleMania 20. Because
PG.
Oh yeah, and more
and
so
let
when
me
they went
let me
PG
jump
too,
in real quick, just for context of that. You have to, for those of you listening at home, you just have to think about the night after WrestleMania 19, just the amount of star power that vanished literally overnight. Well, I guess between 19 and 24, or between 19 and 20, just the amount of star power that left, and you still had Shawn Michaels and Triple H and Undertaker there, but you didn't have the over the top. You had people still in the main event running the show in those top spots, but just imagine in the 80s, all of a sudden, Hulk Hogan, Macho Man, Ultimate Warrior, Andre the Giant, you take all of them out of the picture just all at once, and you're left with Million Dollar Man, Sergeant Slaughter, and Piper at the top, and no one else. Those are still great talents and names, but you just lost like what's going to get you over. So I say that all for context, because that's something I haven't had a moment like that in my fandom, just because I didn't grow up in an era where those once in a lifetime people left. So you've had those moments, but what were the things that, or what's a particular instant that kind of roped you back in to give it another shot, per se?
Well, one thing was TNA with Kevin Nash, Sting, and Kurt Angle, and Christian all going to TNA at a similar time frame. Kevin Nash was the first guy that really got me to start checking out TNA, and whenever Sting came in, I believe that's when I started like watching a lot more regularly, and I was all in on TNA a lot more than WWE. I think from about like 06 to maybe like 2010, 2011, and but the thing that drew me back to WWE would have been in 2012. There were really two things that happened. At the end of 2011, Kane came back with the mask, which was huge for me. And then The Rock came back and was feuding with John Cena, and that WrestleMania 28 match. And WrestleMania 28 in general was kind of the event that really got me excited about wrestling again. I was pumped as heck for John Cena versus The Rock at WrestleMania, and I was in weightlifting class junior year of high school and working out, trying to emulate like The Rock and John Cena in their training videos, and then Brock Lesnar came back the night after WrestleMania 28. So those three things happening all at once really made that like a renaissance in my fandom, which kind of died off a little bit in 2013 and 14, but was renewed once again when Goldberg came back in 2016. Or was it 2016 or 17?
I think it was late 16.
Yeah, when he came back, that I was...
it was late 16 because they were promoting 2K17.
Yeah, I was enthralled with that. And him coming back again this year, I mean, anytime you get a big star from when I was little in, I'm all about it. And you also had Sid leading up to the Raw 1000, which also happened in 2012. The New Age Outlaws coming back in 2013. There was just a lot of things from the Attitude Era that was pulling me back in, because it basically felt like every year of my life wrestling was getting a little bit worse. It's like, well, it's not as good as when I was a little kid. And at some point I came to the realization that it would never be that good again, but if I saw flashes from back then, that's what would pull me back.
And one of the things we've talked about a lot, and we've referenced it a couple of times on here, is, and this is no kick at them, but new stars and rising stars don't draw. Established and overstars do, because there's a big difference in star power, just from a financial standpoint, in peak prime Hulk Hogan's drawing power versus a 2015, 2016, 2017 Roman Reigns drawing power. That's nothing against Roman, but he hasn't been around long enough to have that presence that's just over the top, larger than life, to where you bust out of WWE.
Steiner didn't become a main event draw in his athletic prime. It wasn't until he was a little bit older and he was that big Papa Pump over the top character that was awesome.
Because you had the equity of being established. Same with Jericho. of course, there's going to be the purists who will analyze the stuff he did in Japan and even the stuff he did in WCW, but you don't see peak Jericho until really him leaving WCW and entering the WWF. And there's tons of different examples out there. And that just shows you one of my favorite things is people harp on part-timers and nostalgia acts, but that's what gets me excited. I want to get Alex's answer, but we'll talk about one of those moments that we got to witness live. Alex, I'm going to ask you the same question. What's a moment that you witnessed that kind of pulled you back into wrestling and it convinced you to give it another chance?
Well, David took a lot of my answers. Kurt Angle going to TNA, Kane wearing the mask right after The Rock came back, and then Brock coming back right after that, all happening in just a few months, and that really pulled me back in, and even to an extent, how I'm still watching wrestling today. But I'm going to think of a different moment. My dad was a WCW loyalist, of course, and a lot of those guys went to TNA, and after Kurt Angle came in, we watched much more TNA than WWE for years. And I think when Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff came in, we watched TNA hard because we did not know what was going to happen next. Now, we know in hindsight they lost a lot of their identity and maybe paid too much for Hogan, from my understanding of it, the situation. But, I mean, I was 11 and I didn't know that Eric Bischoff was coming in. So finding out Hulk Hogan showing up, then Eric Bischoff shows up, and even people like the Nasty Boys showed up that day, and it's like, I just had to know what was going to happen next in TNA there, and the excitement did wear off eventually, but, I mean, I still watched TNA up until like 2014 or whenever they got off a Spike.
I'll always say pro wrestling and being a wrestling fan is a lot like being in an abusive relationship. You constantly want out of it, but there's always something that happens that makes you give it another chance. For me, then we share a lot of those moments. David and I were actually on the phone together when Brock came back out. And I'll never forget. We were sitting there watching it, and the crowd was chanting Lesnar, and David just happened. I couldn't tell what they were saying, but David just happened to say, "It sounds like they're saying Lesnar." And then all of a sudden, Brock's music hit, and we were back to the races. Another moment for me.
Oh, that was a freak out on the phone. I'll never forget that.
Another moment for me that's very non-traditional was I'd kind of stepped out of wrestling. I still loved wrestling. Watched the DVDs that I had, played the games that I had. Talked about it with friends, and this is 2010 for me, and I hadn't watched wrestling in probably about a year or so, if not more, and just happened to turn on the final segment of Raw, go home before SummerSlam 2010, and I see something called the Nexus in the ring, and they do a really good job of saying that here's this team led by Bret Hart and John Cena that's going to challenge the Nexus for like control of the WWE. And it was billed as Team WWE versus Team Nexus, and I want to say I know it was Cena, Bret Hart, maybe The Miz, and then Edge and Jericho, and you have the Nexus in the ring, and they're challenging all the WWE guys to come down and fight him. And they're all kind of standing right at the edge of the ramp looking at the Nexus. And I just remember like, oh, like cool, it'll end like in a brawl or something. And all of a sudden, Edge and Jericho just kind of like brush off the other guys because they were huge heels at that time and turn their backs on them and start walking up the ramp, and you're like, well, okay, well, it looks like Raw's going to end with Cena and Bret Hart getting mutilated by the Nexus. And I just remember them stopping at the top of the ramp, and they just kind of looked at each other. And I don't know if I had the TV up really loud or what, but for some reason that crowd reaction was just really hot, kind of like the murmur of like, wait a minute, they're pausing, and I can hear distinctly like the sound of like people like stomping their feet in the arena, and two veterans just with the patience. One of the biggest gripes I have with modern pro wrestling is just everything happens too fast and you don't milk it for what it's worth, and you just have this moment where it felt like an eternity, but it was probably only like 2 minutes where they just let the crowd build and build, and it starts to silent down. And so as it starts to silent down, Edge and Jericho look at each other and then look down to the ring, and now all of a sudden the audience reaction spikes higher and higher, and then they let it start falling a little bit, and then they both just start sprinting down to the ring. The brawl starts, and so now they've kind of let what you'll see with a lot of old timers is they'll kind of tease the crowd, let the reaction grow, let it die, but before it goes completely out, build it back up, and we'll do that a couple of times before you go to the big moment. And I just remember like getting goosebumps watching that, to where it was like, whoa, like that was actually good, and like a big reaction. And it was a wholesome moment. But I never ordered pay-per-view, so I had to wait till it went up on WWE.com to see.
Don't Google the
payoff
core,
was.
brother. HH.
Oh, rest in peace. This is what I don't understand. The Nexus seemed to be cool at first. New Nexus was pretty cool with Punk as the leader. And then the core happened, and, well, we don't talk about it, brother. HH.
Punky Brewster.
Now, here's something else I want to ask you guys, and this will be a little bit of a shorter episode, so we'll start kind of pretend we're getting ready to round third. What's your favorite, if you could only watch one match right now, what would it be?
One match right now.
What?
One show.
One
One champion.
belt.
Oh.
Championship. Well, you couldn't say belt back then, probably.
All right. I'm going to let Alex take the wheel first on this one.
I think it was Bad Blood 97, Shawn Michaels versus Undertaker in the first Heck in a Sec match. Keep it PG. And you got Kane debuting at the end. Shawn Michaels getting the you-know-what kicked out of him for like 20 minutes. One of the best matches ever, without a doubt. Maybe the one I'd pick to watch forever if I could.
Hate in the crate.
Hate in the crate. Shout out to Budget Cuts with WWE. I love that answer, Alex. That's a great match. David, do you have an answer?
Oh, man, he picked a great one right there with the Kane debut, too. Oh, it's just so great. I'm going to go with the first blood match between Kane and Stone Cold Steve Austin for the WWF Championship. King of the Ring, 1998. Yep. It followed one of the greatest matches ever between The Undertaker and Mankind, which I easily could have put there. But I wanted to give a not so basic answer, and one that probably reflects me a bit more with my very two favorite wrestlers. And one of the reasons why I had a photo of me on my kindergarten folder dressed as Stone Cold Steve Austin with a sock in my mouth to be my goatee and my Austin 316 jersey, my Daisy Dukes and cowboy boots, trying to look like Stone Cold, but probably looking lame. I wish I could find the picture now, but thank you.
Now, this is kind of what we will end on, because you cannot be a wrestling fan and be completely normal. It's impossible. Like if you claim to like wrestling, you're not normal, and I mean that in the least offensive way. But especially if you grew up as a wrestling fan, there's some part of your fandom that you put in the shame closet for no one else to see. For David and I think it's absolutely e-fetting, and I'm cringing as hard as I can talking about it. So if you don't know what e-fetting is, basically it was online role-playing.
You're outing me as a big loser right now.
It's okay. I'm right there with you, brother. we'll go to New York together on this
I
one.
was jealous of you two for doing that. I never did.
And here, so what it was is I can't even remember how I discovered one. But it was a Pro Boards forum site, not Angel Fire, but Pro Boards, and it was basically you would choose either a real wrestler or a created wrestler to be, and you'd come up with your bio, your move set, and all that stuff. And then you would have these, it's hard to explain, you would have these role played promos and segments. And it was basically who could type out the best promo that fit with whatever your storyline was. And the moderators at the website would most of the time side with whatever the best promo was, and there were generators like for match results where you would plug in names and moves, and it would give you just a huge paragraph of, okay, the match starts with this going on and this going on. So it was fun just to kind of get into it. But David and I, we got worked big time, brother, because we got on a website where
Bonus points to anyone that used the different colors in their promos for the different people talking
and the different
giving way too much detail for your entrance and how many steps you took and how you slowly went up the ropes or whatever.
How many times did we, just to add length to it, we would type whatever the name of the theme song was, plays through the PA system.
Oh yeah, I know. We definitely did that. Every time.
There were, on this first website.
How else are you going to win the Wreckage Championship?
Exactly. Hey, I'm just saying, as Kurt Angle, I retired the Wreckage Championship for reasons that will not be aired. But on our first website that we were doing this role playing on, at first we thought that it might be the real wrestlers. Because of their names. We had Chris Benoit, Triple H.
Mark Henry was on there. And Mark Henry seemed very genuine.
And we just believed it, and what we didn't realize, it was just other people just typing promos that sounded like things they would say. Because you and I, we just use it, created names. You were Big Money, and I was Skittles 9987. Just like imagine you've got New Jack 187, but having a wrestler come down the ring and Skittles 9987. And the more we got into it, we found a couple other websites. And even created a couple of ours. And one of mine,
Mr. Poe 5.
We're gonna leave it at that and see if you find that, post a screenshot or two in the Brothers and Kayfabe podcast Facebook group.
Create an account, join up, get your voice heard
on
a dead website.
Get your voice heard by Storm Dane. But there were some really out there characters. There was a time I was Bill Cosby. There was a time David was Ozzy Osbourne.
George Lopez.
David, just real quick, tell them what your worst nightmare is.
Your worst nightmare is a mashup picture thing I did in Microsoft Paint where the face is half unmasked Kane and half Bill Goldberg. And in the papyrus red font, it says, like, Kaneberg, your worst nightmare.
I will say,
I'm recreating the look with my face right now. It's amazing. If only you could see me morph half my face into Kane and half it into Goldberg. Isn't this incredible, guys? Look at it.
It's the real thing. Your hair's even gone.
That's not coming back.
How'd you get one of your eyes to change color, brother? One of the weird things about that is we learned basic HTML coding by being on these websites. And
oh yeah,
and
Photoshop.
Photoshop. That's how we got into graphic design, and that's one of the things you do as a living, and that all stemmed from us getting into. They would have these contests called GFX, which I guess was just slang for graphics. That's the only thing I could think of, and they would have these contests where they would have a prompt, and you would basically just make a photoshopped graphic, and it might be, okay, here's our pay-per-view poster.
Oh man,
You have until
I
next
submitted
Sunday.
the Royal Rumble for Dreamcast video game just because I thought I was the only one who played it, and it was like my favorite game as a kid.
I being a new fan, hook, line, and sinker, I was like, whoa, like that's cool. And then I just happened to I Googled Royal Rumble cover, like poster or something like that to try and find inspiration. And then I just realized it was a video game cover. I will also say one of the cool things, and you can do this with Fig Feds, but the cool thing about the E Feds was just some of the crazy matches. There was something called a Tower of Doom match, and the graphic they used was the Isengard Tower from Lord of the Rings. Just this big black tower with Gandalf chilling at the top of it. And there was this weird like subway match, and they used a screenshot from Spider-Man 2 of the train headed towards the edge of the tracks to run off, and to where what the match was is it was a match that took place on the subway, and you had to get a pinfall by a certain stop, and the winner was allowed to get off, and the other had to ride it as it would train wreck afterwards.
Could you win by making a footlong the fastest?
It's possible. There was one, David, remember the end zone stretcher match?
I remember that was from like the Super Bowl themed pay-per-view, but I could not tell you the premise of the match.
It was Samoa Joe versus Jeff Hardy, because this was on Mr. Poe 5. And I thought it would be fun to have a pay-per-view inspired by the Super Bowl, because that was the year after the Steelers won, I believe. Because we were sick the year the Steelers won, brother. But anyway, so I came up with an end zone stretcher match where it was just a stretcher match, but on the stage they had an end zone set up with the field goal and everything. And you won by putting your opponent on the stretcher and wheeling him through the end zone. Which I'm just saying, especially during the lockdown quarantine episodes of wrestling happening, I'd mark out if they did a XFL end zone stretcher match.
That would be money in any time period. I think the Flintstones could get that over.
I mean, a stretcher match is cool, but I mean, having to wheel them through the end zone.
Oh yeah.
I will say, you get.
And it's kind of like how video games and toys, especially those two, when Alex and I were younger, like kind of they carry your interest in wrestling in the days in between from week to week on wrestling. Like when during the downtime when you can't watch and you're still excited and thinking about it, e-fedding and toys and games were just ways like that we stayed hype about wrestling around the clock.
You would be inspired from watching it, and you would have that stuff throughout the week to just continue to build the excitement and tap into it. I will say, we'll talk about this later. This goes in along with some news that we'll end the episode on. But at Double or Nothing, they did the weird Stampede Stadium Stampede match, which was a callback to the NWA and Jim Crockett Bunkhouse Stampede matches, which basically it's just an empty arena match.
I'm more familiar with like the uncensored 2000
there
kind of WCW, but
well, that's I will say watching
this before my time.
Watching this match, all I could think about was Norman Smiley defending the hardcore title in WCW.
Now you're speaking my language.
And
yeah.
The one thing that I will say it genuinely popped me was they're doing their entrances, and Jericho's team comes out, and they're all wearing football pants and jerseys. And just the ridiculousness of going that far. But a shout out to video game homage that I liked. I can't remember which one. One of the members of LAX that's there, they're fighting in the lower deck of the actual stadium seating underneath kind of the big archways that you walk into between seating sections. And he does the No Mercy Irish whip through the curtains to go. And as soon as he goes through, the camera cuts to them being in the next arena location. And that's something during these, pre-taped matches, take advantage of. I know this would never happen. Definitely not with WWE, not with AEW. But if any wrestling company were to put the SmackDown game blue triangles, somehow like on the floor during a backstage fight, and if they were to walk up to it and then it cuts to a different camera angle, kind of lower on the ground, watching them do a slow, very pompous march through the doors or through the curtains, and then automatically go to another camera cut of them in that new location. Just make it super cinematic, just like the video games.
I would love to see like a SmackDown shut your mouth, like somebody doing an elbow drop off a helicopter, or
get big fists on the old SmackDown logo.
Oh yeah, running someone over with a car.
We could. I mean, this is the time to do it. Take advantage of having to be forced to be creative in a time like this where you're limited. You can't. Here's the thing: TV wrestling is written to be received as TV. It's not written for the live crowd. At least it shouldn't be. And house shows should be aimed at the live crowd and not a TV crowd, because they both translate different. And this is a time where you don't have the live crowd, so make it 100% aimed for the TV. Well, we are just under an hour, and like I said, this is a different episode thanks to Catalina coming after me and my family's security. And during the trial of my life, Catalina turned their back on me. So at WrestleMania 19, it will be a no-holds-barred match between me and Catalina OS. Plot twist, Roddy Piper's going to come out and help me. That's the plan, at least. So we're going to start winding down. I'm going to get to a couple of plugs, but first I want to give you a little bit of news. So this episode, you were listening to it on Wednesday morning. We are going to move our podcast just because we want to stay a little more current, because this show is never going to be a review. It's never going to be analytical. But when things happen, when shows happen, we'll touch on them. And so we want to be a little more current with those releases. So we're going to start moving our release days to Saturday. So what that means is this week, you get this episode today as you're listening to it on Wednesday. And you'll get a brand new episode on Saturday as well. And then every Saturday going forward. So stay tuned for that. We're not going anywhere. We're just shifting days to make it a little more accommodating to you in any time-sensitive events. David, thanks for being on. You do graphic design and you also do physical art. If someone wanted to reach out to you about art commission, whether it's a drawing or some graphic work, how could they get in touch with you?
Well, they can either email me at foxmccright@gmail.com. That would be foxmccright@gmail.com. Or at Dangerous Davy Cakes on Instagram, and that's Davy with an EY, not an IE, on Instagram. And I do all kinds of different art. I do comic book art. I can do digital art, like we were talking about, kind of the GFX style with the fancy brushes and picture collages, and I can do almost any kind of media. I'm even a skilled painter. So hit me up for any kind of art commission that you might have.
I'll vouch for him. Especially, something fun during this quarantine is, hire David to draw a sketch of a loved one or of your family, or if you have a pet chinchilla, he can really draw one of those. Alex, thank you for being on the podcast as well. I look forward to you sleeping on my couch this evening. Alex, I know you don't have anything to plug.
He's a talented boy. He's got a lot of stuff
off
in the
the
works.
top, and that's what I'm about to get to. Alex, for your plug, off the top of your head, what's one movie somebody should watch this week?
the driver from 1978 from Walter Hill.
There you go. For Jake, make sure you
Letterboxd.
listen to Best Movie Ever. He's got some stuff coming up there. If you need any help with production stuff, especially when it comes to graphics, Jake can also help you up with that. Jimmy, he's got the Date Bit podcast. I highly recommend you listening to that. A new episode just dropped of Date Bit. Plot twist, I'm on there, and you'll get to hear me talk about some of my earliest video game memories along with some hidden gems and just influential moments. That is the letter D, the number 8, Bit podcast. You can find that everywhere you listen to. They have a public email address that you can get off their show to listen to. Follow them on Instagram as well. For Brothers in Kayfabe, you can find us on Facebook in our podcast group. You can find us on Twitter. You can find us on Instagram. Please, 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 if you like our content, give us some feedback. We want to hear from you, whether you're reviewing us on iTunes or Spotify, or if you're commenting a moment you liked from the show, or if there's something you want to chime in about. Tell us what kind of wrestling you're watching, what podcasts you're listening to. We want to just have a community where we get to really just shine a light, because wrestling, especially wrestling Twitter and Instagram, is such just a gross arguing, bickering place 24/7. It seems like everyone that talks about wrestling online doesn't like anything about wrestling online. So we just want to put a spotlight on the stuff that we like as individuals and that we would want other people to watch. There's certain communities that do it better than others, but our community is the Brothers in Kayfabe podcast. We've got a Patreon with a $1 tier or a whatever you want tier. We're going to start throwing some stuff up there. Good brother Jake just threw up a fig hunting episode. Who knows? Maybe we'll get some exclusive David McCright wrestling art up there. Maybe I will throw up a picture of our... So me and David's apartment, we have a little cabinet. It's like a little miniature China cabinet full of Hasbro's, Galoobs, and Mattel Retros. So who knows? And let us know if there's anything like that, because we just want to create, it, like I said, a community that we all enjoy. Thanks for sticking with us through a weird episode this week as we kind of roll with Capitalism's Punches. Stay tuned. Remember, Saturday, we've got a second episode dropping for this week, and that will be our new date. But it's super late. Let's go to bed, boys. Bring it in. Let's get a Too Sweet. Too Sweet
for life.